I stood in my penthouse office overlooking downtown Seattle when my phone buzzed, Mom's number. I hadn't heard from her in 8 years, not since they threw me out at 24, believing my sister Amanda's lie that I'd stolen Dad's life savings. They called me a thief, a disappointment, a cancer on the family. Dad died hating me. Now Mom was calling, her voice shaking with desperation, begging me to save them from losing everything. I looked at that screen and felt absolutely nothing. 8 years ago, I was a completely different person. At 24, I was working 2 jobs while finishing my business degree at the University of Washington. I stocked shelves at a grocery store during the day and bartended 3 nights a week. Every dollar I earned went toward tuition and saving for my own place. I lived at home in Tacoma to cut costs, sharing that modest 3-bedroom house with my parents and my younger sister Amanda. My father, Greg, was a retired electrician with rough hands and a soft heart. He'd spent 30 years climbing poles and rewiring houses, saving every penny he could. My mother, Patricia, worked as a school secretary until her knees gave out. They weren't wealthy people, but they were proud. They'd raised us to value honesty above everything else. The irony of that still burns. Amanda was 22 then, 2 years younger than me. She worked retail at a department store in the mall, always complaining about her manager or her schedule or her paycheck. We weren't particularly close, but we weren't enemies either. She was my sister. I thought that meant something. Dad kept his retirement savings at home. $75,000 in cash, stored in a safe bolted to the floor of his bedroom closet. He didn't trust banks after the 2008 recession. Mom had begged him to deposit it somewhere secure, but he was stubborn. That money represented 3 decades of sacrifice, every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, every dream deferred. It was supposed to fund their retirement, maybe a small RV to travel the country. One Thursday morning in March, I woke up to screaming. Dad's voice, raw and broken, echoed through the house. I ran downstairs in my boxers and t-shirt to find him standing in the living room, his face purple with rage and disbelief. The safe door hung open. The money was gone. Mom sat on the couch, hands over her mouth, rocking back and forth. Amanda stood in the corner wearing her bathrobe, mascara streaked down her face like she'd been crying for hours. When I asked what happened, Dad turned on me with eyes I'd never seen before. Cold, accusing. Amanda spoke up then, her voice small and trembling. She said she'd seen me the night before, around 2 a.m. She claimed she'd gotten up to use the bathroom and noticed light coming from our parents' bedroom. When she peeked in, she saw me crouched by the open safe with a black duffel bag. She said I looked startled when I noticed her, that I'd put my finger to my lips and whispered for her to go back to bed. She said she was scared, confused, didn't know what to do. She said she'd lain awake all night wrestling with whether to say something, and when Dad discovered the theft that morning, she couldn't stay silent anymore. I couldn't breathe. The accusation was so absurd, so completely fabricated, that I actually laughed. Wrong response. Dad's face went from purple to nearly black. He started yelling, asking how I could do this to them, how I could steal from my own father. I tried to defend myself, tried to explain that I'd been asleep all night, that I could never do something like that. But Amanda kept crying, kept insisting on what she'd seen. Mom searched my room while I stood there in shock. She found the $3,200 I'd been saving from my jobs, tucked in an envelope in my desk drawer. I'd been so proud of that money. It was my apartment deposit, my ticket to independence. I'd been planning to move out in 2 months, right after graduation. Amanda's voice cut through my protests. She said that must be part of the stolen money, that I'd probably already moved the rest somewhere safe. The logic was insane, but grief and anger aren't logical. Dad snatched the envelope from Mom's hands, threw it at my chest. The bills scattered across my bedroom floor like evidence at a crime scene. I begged them to listen. I showed them my bank statements, my pay stubs, the timeline of my savings. Nothing mattered. Dad's trust had been shattered, and in his mind, I was the one holding the hammer. He told me I had 30 minutes to pack my things and get out of his house. Not our house, his house. The distinction felt like a knife. Mom cried but didn't defend me. Amanda watched from the hallway, her tears convenient and perfectly timed. I threw clothes into a backpack, grabbed my laptop and textbooks, took my $3,200 from the floor. 28 minutes later, I walked out the front door. Dad changed the locks that afternoon. I tried calling for weeks, every number blocked. I sent emails, no responses. I drove back to the house twice. Dad met me at the door the first time and threatened to call the police. The second time, no one answered even though I could see shadows moving behind the curtains. I finished my final semester living in a motel that charged $220 a week and smelled like cigarette smoke and mildew. I ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches. I stopped sleeping more than 4 hours a night, terrified I'd miss a shift or an exam. The isolation was crushing. I'd lost my entire family in one morning based on a lie, and there was no appeal process, no jury, no second chance. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't discover until much later, was that Amanda had a secret. She'd developed a gambling addiction that she'd hidden from everyone. She'd started with office poker games, then graduated to the casino on the reservation 40 minutes south of Tacoma. By the time she blamed me for the theft, she was $70,000 in debt to some very dangerous people who'd given her 1 week to pay or face consequences she didn't want to imagine. She needed that money in the safe, and she needed someone to blame. I was convenient. The next 2 years were the hardest of my life. I graduated with honors in June, walked across that stage alone while other families cheered and took photos. I'd invited my parents anyway, sent them the details. They didn't come. I collected my diploma, went back to my motel room, and cried for the first time since they'd kicked me out. I landed an entry-level position at a tech startup in Seattle called PropertyLink. They developed software for commercial property management. The pay was $38,000 a year, barely enough to survive in Seattle, but it was a foot in the door. I moved into a studio apartment in Rainier Valley, one of the cheaper neighborhoods. My windows looked out at a parking lot, and I could hear my neighbors arguing through the thin walls, but it was mine. I worked relentlessly. 60, 70-hour weeks. I volunteered for every project, learned every system, made myself indispensable. I had nothing else in my life, no family to visit on holidays, no girlfriend, no real friends. Work filled the void, and I was grateful for it. At 26, 2 years after being disowned, I stopped at a coffee shop in Capitol Hill before work. I was standing in line, half asleep, when someone called my name. I turned to see my cousin Derek, my mom's nephew, staring at me like he'd seen a ghost. Derek was 32 then, worked in construction, had always been the cool older cousin when we were kids. He pulled me into a hug that I didn't return. He asked where I'd been, said the whole family thought I'd disappeared somewhere in shame after what I'd done. The words stung, but I was used to the pain by then. We sat down with our coffees. I gave him the basic outline of my life, the apartment, the job, the complete absence of contact with my parents or sister. He looked uncomfortable, kept glancing at the table. Then he said something that made my blood stop moving. 6 months after I'd been kicked out, Amanda had suddenly paid cash for a brand new BMW. $45,000, just wrote a check. She told everyone she'd won a sales contest at work, that the prize was $50,000. Derek said it seemed weird at the time, but no one questioned it. But Derek had seen Amanda at the Emerald Queen Casino multiple times before the theft, always at the high-stakes tables, always looking stressed and frantic. He'd never mentioned it to anyone because it wasn't his business. But after hearing my side, the pieces clicked together in his mind. I sat there holding my coffee cup so tight I thought it might shatter. I asked why he never said anything. Derek looked ashamed. He said the family had closed ranks, that going against the narrative would have made him an outcast too. He said he was sorry, that he should have been braver, but family politics are complicated. Then he told me something that broke me in a different way. Dad had died 11 months earlier. Heart attack. Massive and sudden. He was 62 years old. I'd never gotten to say goodbye. Never gotten a chance to prove my innocence to him. He died believing his son was a thief who'd stolen his life savings and run away like a coward. That knowledge hollowed me out. Derek saw my face and kept talking, maybe trying to fill the terrible silence. He said Mom and Amanda still lived in the house together. He said Amanda had been borrowing money from Mom over the years, always with excuses about medical bills or car repairs or some emergency. He said Mom was struggling financially but wouldn't admit there'd been any mistake about me. We exchanged numbers before parting. Derek hugged me again, whispered another apology. I walked to work in a daze. At my desk, I stared at my computer screen for an hour without seeing it. My father was dead. He'd died hating me. And my sister, the person who destroyed my life, was still bleeding our mother dry while I'd been building a new existence from nothing. Something crystallized in me that day. I stopped trying to prove my innocence. I stopped imagining some future reconciliation. I accepted that the family I'd grown up with was gone, buried with my father. What remained was just biology and shared history, nothing more. I made a silent vow in that moment. If they ever came back, if they ever needed something from me, I would show them exactly what they'd thrown away. I threw myself into work with renewed intensity. I wasn't building a career anymore. I was building armor. Over the next 6 years, I transformed my life. At 27, I had a breakthrough. PropertyLink's biggest client was threatening to leave because our software couldn't predict maintenance issues well enough. I spent 3 months developing an AI integration that analyzed historical data, weather patterns, and building age to predict when things like HVAC systems or roofs would need repairs. The accuracy rate was 87%. That innovation saved the client $2.3 million in the first year. My boss promoted me to senior developer, then team lead, then director of innovation. The company exploded, growing from 40 employees to 300 in 3 years. When I was 30, PropertyLink went public. The stock options I'd accumulated became real money. Not generational wealth, but more than I'd ever imagined. My shares were worth $1.8 million overnight. I bought a penthouse in downtown Seattle with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound. I could see the ferries cutting across the water, the Olympic Mountains in the distance. It was 1,500 square feet of modern luxury, nothing like the cramped motel or the tiny studio that had housed my survival years. By 32, my current age, I was VP of Product Development. My base salary was $400,000 a year, plus stock that had grown to over $3 million in value. I drove a Tesla Model S, wore suits tailored in Italy, ate at restaurants where a single meal cost more than I used to spend on food in a month. But I never forgot. The success felt good, but it was hollow. I'd built everything alone, and there was no one to share it with. I dated occasionally, but I could never fully trust anyone. The walls around my heart were made of titanium, built brick by brick during those years of isolation. I stayed in touch with Derek. He was my only connection to my old life, and he kept me updated on things I told myself I didn't care about but secretly did. He told me Dad's death had been hard on Mom, that she'd aged 20 years overnight. He told me Amanda was still working retail, still single, still living with Mom. He said the house looked run down, that they seemed to be struggling. Part of me felt satisfaction. Karma was real. But another part, one I tried to ignore, felt something else. Something uncomfortable that might have been grief or regret or the ghost of love I couldn't quite kill. Then, one afternoon 3 months ago, Derek called with information that changed everything. He said his wife, Amanda's former best friend, had gotten drunk with Amanda at a girls' night. Amanda had apparently broken down crying, confessed that she'd been living with guilt for 8 years. She said she wished she could take back what she'd done to me, that she thought about it every day, that the shame was eating her alive. But she'd never told Mom the truth. She was too afraid of losing the only family she had left. Derek's wife had told him, and Derek told me. I listened to this second-hand confession in my office, city spread below me like a kingdom I'd conquered. I felt nothing. The guilt was Amanda's to carry. The revelation was 8 years too late and a lifetime short of meaningful. I thanked Derek for the information and went back to work. But something had shifted. I knew now that Amanda knew I knew. The dynamic had changed, even if we never spoke. I didn't have to wait long to see what would happen next. 3 months after learning about Amanda's drunken confession, my phone rang with Mom's number. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I was in my office reviewing quarterly projections when the screen lit up. Patricia Miller. I stared at it through 3 rings, watching my past try to force its way into my present. I didn't answer. She called back an hour later, then again that evening, then twice the next day. I let every call go to voicemail but never listened to the messages. If it had been 8 years since she'd wanted to talk to me, she could wait a few more days. On the 4th day, I finally called back. I wanted her to have been waiting, wondering, feeling a fraction of the helplessness I'd felt when I was 24 and alone. She answered on the first ring. Her voice hit me like a physical thing. It was my mother's voice, but older, weathered, with a tremor I didn't remember. She said my name like a question. Carlton? Like she wasn't sure it was really me. I kept my voice flat. What do you want, Patricia? Using her first name instead of Mom was deliberate. Clinical. She flinched audibly. She started talking fast, words tumbling over each other. She said she was sorry to bother me, that she knew I probably didn't want to hear from her. That much was accurate. She said she didn't know who else to turn to. She said they were in trouble. I waited. Let the silence stretch. Made her say it. The house was being foreclosed on. They had 60 days before the bank took it, and they'd be on the street. She started crying then, that distinctive sound of an older woman breaking down. She was 72 years old, she said. She couldn't work. She was living on $930 a month in Social Security. Amanda's paycheck was being garnished for debts. They had nowhere to go. I asked the obvious question. What happened? Patricia's voice got smaller. Amanda had taken out a home equity loan on the house 2 years ago. The house had been put in both her and Amanda's names after Dad died for estate planning purposes. Amanda had needed Patricia's signature, but she'd forged it. Patricia hadn't known about the loan until the default notices started arriving 6 months ago. How much? I asked. $120,000. I let out a low whistle. What did she use it for? Patricia's silence told me she knew the answer, but didn't want to say it. Finally, she admitted that Amanda had told her it was for an investment opportunity. But the money had disappeared. There was no investment, just debt. I didn't tell her I already knew where the money went. That Amanda's gambling addiction had never stopped, had probably gotten worse over the years. That my sister had been systematically destroying what was left of our family's financial stability while Mom looked the other way. Patricia asked the question that I knew was coming. We need your help, Carlton. Hearing my name from her lips after 8 years felt surreal. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just need. Just the assumption that biology created obligation. Why would I help you? I kept my voice calm, almost curious. She said the words I'd been waiting for. The words I'd fantasized about throwing back in her face. Because we're family. I laughed. Actually laughed. A bitter sound that came from somewhere deep and cold. I said, You made it very clear 8 years ago that I wasn't family. You threw me out like garbage based on a lie. You chose Amanda over me without a single shred of evidence. You let Dad die, believing I was a thief. Patricia tried to interrupt, her voice rising with desperation. She said they were wrong, that they should have listened to me. She said Amanda had finally told her the truth last month. 8 years later. After Dad was dead, after I'd spent years rebuilding my entire life from nothing, I told her the truth was convenient now that she needed money. She begged. Actually begged. Said she was my mother, that she had nowhere else to turn, that she'd do anything. The desperation in her voice should have moved me. Maybe it would have, 8 years ago. But that version of me was dead. I surprised myself with what I said next. I'll think about it. Give me a week. The relief in her voice was immediate. Thank you. I knew you had a good heart. I hung up without responding. I didn't have a good heart. I had a calculating one. I called Derek immediately. I needed every detail about the foreclosure. He sent me documents, bank information, timelines. I studied them like battle plans because that's what they were. Then I made some calls. I had contacts at several banks through my work. I asked careful questions about the loan on my parents' house. What I discovered made my jaw clench. Amanda hadn't just taken out the home equity loan. She'd also forged Patricia's signature on 3 credit cards over the past 4 years. The total debt on those cards was $41,000. Patricia didn't even know about them yet. The statements went to a P.O. box Amanda had set up. My sister hadn't just made one mistake. She'd been committing fraud for years, slowly bleeding our mother dry, while Patricia still protected her. Still made excuses for her addiction and her choices. The total debt wasn't $120,000. It was $161,000. I sat in my penthouse that night with a glass of whiskey, looking out at the city lights reflecting off the dark water of Puget Sound. I could write a check for that amount tomorrow, and not even notice the dent in my accounts. That realization felt powerful and terrible at the same time. They'd thrown me away when I had nothing. Now I had everything, and they were drowning. I started forming a plan, not a rescue, something else. Something that would give me what I needed, even if I wasn't entirely sure what that was yet. A week later, I drove down to Tacoma. The drive on Interstate 5 took 45 minutes, traffic flowing smoothly on a Wednesday morning. Every mile felt like traveling backward through time. I'd called Patricia the day before and told her I wanted to see the situation in person before making any decisions. She'd agreed immediately, her voice flooding with hope that made my stomach twist. The neighborhood looked exactly as I remembered, and completely different at the same time. The houses were the same modest ramblers built in the 70s, but everything seemed smaller, more worn. Or maybe I'd just gotten used to different surroundings. I pulled up to the house in my Tesla. The contrast was stark. The house looked defeated. Paint peeling on the trim, gutters sagging, lawn patchy and overgrown. The driveway had cracks spreading like spider webs. This was what 75,000 stolen dollars and 8 years of financial struggle looked like. I sat in the car for a moment, gathering myself. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my heart was racing. I hadn't set foot in this house since the morning they'd kicked me out. Every memory felt sharp and dangerous. Patricia opened the door before I could knock. She must have been watching for me. The sight of her hit me harder than I'd expected. She'd always been a sturdy woman, solid and capable. Now she looked fragile. She'd lost weight, her clothes hanging loose. Her hair was completely gray, thin. She'd developed a stoop, her shoulders rounded forward. Her hands shook slightly as she reached toward me, then dropped when she saw my expression. I stayed formal. "Hello, Patricia." She stepped back to let me in. The inside of the house smelled like old coffee and something faintly medicinal. The furniture was the same, but everything looked tired. The couch cushions sagged. The carpet was worn in paths between rooms. Family photos still lined the hallway, but I noticed all the ones that included me had been taken down. That absence felt like a statement. Amanda was sitting at the kitchen table. I stopped in the doorway when I saw her. My sister had changed as much as Patricia. She'd gained significant weight, her face puffy and aged beyond her 30 years. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, dark circles under her eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in years. Our eyes met. Hers immediately filled with tears and dropped to the table. She couldn't hold my gaze for even 5 seconds. We sat in the living room where they'd condemned me 8 years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I took the same chair I'd sat in that morning, waiting for my father to calm down enough to listen to reason. He never had. I kept my voice businesslike. "I need to see all the financial documents. Everything." Patricia handed over a manila folder with shaking hands. Foreclosure notice, loan documents, bank statements showing months of missed payments, default notices. It was all there. The paper trail of a financial disaster. I read through everything methodically, taking my time. Let them sit in the uncomfortable silence. Let them feel scrutinized and judged. Let them wonder what I was thinking. Amanda broke first. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." I didn't look up from the papers. Sorry doesn't give me back 8 years. She started crying harder. I was desperate. I made a terrible mistake. I finally looked at her. My voice came out cold. "You destroyed Dad's life savings. You destroyed my relationship with him. You let him die, thinking I was a thief. And you call it a mistake?" Amanda put her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. Patricia moved to comfort her, then seemed to think better of it. The maternal instinct was still there, but even she could see how wrong it would look. I set down the papers and pulled out my phone. I'd had my assistant prepare additional documents. I showed them the credit card statements, the $41,000 Amanda had racked up using Patricia's forged signature. Patricia went pale. Her hand went to her chest. "What is this?" Amanda's crying stopped. She looked trapped. I watched her realize that I knew everything. that there were no more secrets to hide behind. I explained, my voice clinical. 3 credit cards, opened over 4 years, all with forged signatures. Your daughter has been committing identity theft against you while you protected her. Patricia turned to Amanda with an expression I recognized. Betrayal. The same look she'd given me 8 years ago. How could you? Amanda couldn't speak, just cried harder. I pressed on. The total debt isn't $120,000, it's $161,000. Patricia made a small sound, like something breaking inside her. I let that information sink in. Then I made my announcement. I could pay this off easily. $161,000 is nothing to me now. Patricia's face transformed. Hope, desperate and hungry. She leaned forward. Carlton, please, I continued, but I'm not going to. The hope drained away like water. Her face crumpled. Why? I stood up. Because you made your choice 8 years ago. You chose Amanda's lie over my truth. You chose comfort over justice. Now you can live with those consequences. Patricia slid off the couch onto her knees. She actually got on her knees in front of me, this 72-year-old woman who'd given birth to me, begging, Please, I'm your mother. Where will I go? I'll end up in a shelter, or on the street. Amanda was sobbing. I'll do anything. Anything to make this right. I looked down at Patricia kneeling there and felt a complicated rush of emotions. Satisfaction, disgust, pity, anger, grief. They all mixed together until I couldn't separate them. I gently removed Patricia's hand from my arm. You should have thought about that before you threw me out without a trial. Before you let Dad die in ignorance. Before you protected Amanda while she bled you dry. I walked toward the door. Patricia was calling my name, her voice breaking. Amanda was saying she'd confess to everyone, that she'd clear my name publicly, that she'd go to therapy, get help, anything I wanted. I turned back from the doorway. It's 8 years too late for any of that to matter. Then Amanda's desperation turned to anger. She stood up, face red and streaked with tears. She screamed that if I didn't help them, she'd go to my company. She'd tell everyone that I'd abandoned my elderly mother and ruined sister. She'd destroy my reputation. She'd make sure everyone knew what kind of person I really was. I stopped, turned back slowly, and smiled. The smile seemed to frighten her more than my anger had. I pulled out my phone again. I showed them everything I'd compiled, police reports about her gambling, bank records showing the pattern of theft, statements from Derek about her casino visits, screenshots of online accounts where she'd lost thousands, legal documentation of the fraud. I said quietly, If you try to damage my reputation, I'll have you prosecuted for identity theft, fraud, and forgery. You'll go to prison, and Patricia will lose the house anyway while you're serving your sentence. Amanda collapsed back into her chair. The fight went out of her completely. I looked at Patricia one more time. You taught me that honesty was the most important value. You broke your own rule, and this is what it cost you. I left. Got in my Tesla. Drove away from that house with both of them crying behind me. The whole drive back to Seattle, I waited to feel victorious. Powerful. Vindicated. Instead, I just felt empty. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange fog. I went to work, had meetings, reviewed code, made decisions that affected hundreds of employees and millions of dollars. On the surface, everything was normal. Underneath, I felt like I was made of static. Derek called every few days. He said Patricia was staying at his house temporarily. The foreclosure auction was scheduled. Amanda was couch surfing with friends who were rapidly losing patience with her. Derek's updates were factual, but I could hear the judgment underneath. He thought I was being cruel. Maybe I was. He asked me directly on one call. Are you really going to let this happen? I told him what I'd told myself. They made their choice. Actions have consequences. Derek was quiet for a moment. Then he said, She's still your mother. And you're better than this. I wasn't sure I was better than this. I wasn't sure I wanted to be. But his words stuck with me. The foreclosure auction was set for the 3rd Tuesday of the month. I knew because Derek sent me the notice. The house would sell for whatever the market would bear, probably around $250,000 given Tacoma's real estate prices. The bank would take what they were owed, and Patricia and Amanda would get nothing. Derek told me Patricia had been researching homeless shelters for seniors. She'd put her name on a waiting list for subsidized housing, but the wait was 6 to 18 months. In the meantime, she'd be in the shelter system, or living in her car. At 72, with bad knees and high blood pressure, Amanda's friends had kicked her out. She was living in her 10-year-old Honda Civic, parking in different locations each night to avoid police. She'd lost her job at the department store for missing too many shifts. I told myself I didn't care. They'd made their bed. That phrase kept running through my head like a mantra. But sleep became difficult. I'd lie in my comfortable bed in my expensive penthouse and think about Patricia in a homeless shelter, about Amanda in her car, about Dad dying before any of this could be resolved. Memories kept surfacing. Mom teaching me to ride a bike, running beside me with her hand on the seat, promising she wouldn't let go, and then letting go anyway so I could find my balance. Dad taking me fishing at American Lake, patient with my tangled lines and lost lures. Family dinners around that scratched kitchen table, arguing about nothing important, laughing at Dad's bad jokes. That family was gone. It had died the morning they kicked me out. But its ghost kept haunting me. I tried to focus on work, on my success, on everything I'd built without them. But the satisfaction felt hollow. The Friday before the auction, Derek showed up at my office, unannounced. My assistant tried to stop him, but he pushed past her. He looked angry in a way I'd never seen. He threw a small journal on my desk. "Patricia asked me to give you this. She wanted you to read it before Tuesday." I stared at the journal like it might bite me. "I don't want it." Derek's voice was hard. "Read it anyway. Then live with your choice." He left. The journal sat on my desk for the rest of the day. I left it there when I went home. But that night, alone in my penthouse with the city lights reflecting off the sound, I couldn't stop thinking about it. At midnight, I drove back to my office. The building was empty, just the night security guard in the lobby who waved me through. I sat at my desk and opened the journal. Patricia's handwriting was shaky now, the letters uneven. But it was definitely hers. I recognized it from birthday cards and grocery lists and notes left on the fridge throughout my childhood. The entries started 3 months after they'd kicked me out. The first one made my chest tight. May 15th. I keep wondering where Carlton is. If he's safe, if he has somewhere to live. Greg won't talk about it. He says he has no son anymore. But I'm a mother. You don't stop being a mother just because you're angry. I keep thinking about his face when we told him to leave. He looked so broken. What if we were wrong? But Amanda seemed so certain. And why would she lie? I flipped through the pages. Entries scattered over 8 years, gaps of months between some of them. September 3rd. Saw a young man at the grocery store today who looked like Carlton from behind. My heart stopped. It wasn't him. I don't even know what I would have said if it was. I miss my son. But Greg says the money is still gone, that Carlton must have hidden it somewhere. Amanda gets so upset when I mention doubts. She says asking questions means I don't believe her. I don't want to lose both my children. December 22nd. First Christmas without Carlton. I set a place for him at the table without thinking, then had to take it away. Greg saw and didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. Amanda gave us nice presents. I don't know how she afforded them. She said she got a bonus. I want to believe her. There were dozens of entries, years of doubt, guilt, longing, years of Patricia choosing the easier lie over the harder truth, years of missing me but not being brave enough to admit she might have been wrong. Then I reached the entries from after Dad died. March 8th. Greg is gone. Heart attack. So sudden. 1 minute he was here, the next he was on the floor and I couldn't save him. The last conversation we had was about refinancing the house. He never knew. He died still angry at Carlton. That feels like a failure I can never fix. I want to find Carlton. Tell him his father is dead. But Greg made me promise not to. He said Carlton wasn't welcome, not even at the funeral. I kept that promise. Now I hate myself for it. My hands were shaking. I hadn't been invited to my own father's funeral. They'd buried him without telling me. The entries continued. Patricia's doubts growing. Amanda borrowing more money. Small lies getting bigger. Patricia feeling trapped between her daughter's needs and her son's absence. The final entry was dated 1 week ago. November 7th. I failed as a mother. The evidence is everywhere. I chose the easy lie over the hard truth. I chose protecting one child over defending another. Carlton deserved better. He deserved a mother who believed in him, who investigated, who didn't just accept the first explanation. Greg died because of the stress and heartbreak of thinking his son betrayed him. That's on me too. I could have pushed harder for the truth. I was just too weak. If we lose everything now, it's what I deserve. I just hope someday Carlton can forgive me, even if I can never forgive myself. I don't expect his help. I don't deserve it. But I need him to know I was wrong, that I'm sorry, that not a day has passed when I didn't miss him. I closed the journal, sat there in my dark office with the weight of 8 years of my mother's regret in my hands. The anger was still there, the hurt, the sense of injustice. They didn't disappear just because Patricia felt guilty, but something else was there too, something uncomfortable that felt like grief for the time we'd all lost. For my father dying in ignorance. For the family we could have been if anyone had been brave enough to demand the truth. I thought about the man I'd become, successful, independent, strong, but also isolated, unable to trust, unable to let anyone close. I'd survived what they'd done to me, but I'd also been shaped by it in ways that weren't all positive. I had a choice now. I could let them lose everything and prove I was exactly as cold as that experience had made me. Or I could do something different. Not for them, for myself, to prove I was more than what they'd forced me to become. My phone rang. Derek. His voice was strained. You need to come to the hospital. Patricia's had a stroke. The journal slipped from my hands onto the desk. Is she okay? They don't know yet. It happened an hour ago. The stress. They're running tests now. I was already grabbing my keys. Which hospital? Tacoma General. I'm on my way. I broke every speed limit driving down Interstate 5. The whole way I kept thinking about that last journal entry. About forgiveness and deserving and the time we don't get back. Tacoma General's emergency room at 2 a.m. was fluorescent and surreal. I found Derek in the waiting area. His face was drawn. Amanda sat in a corner, looking like she'd aged another 5 years in the 3 weeks since I'd seen her. She was wearing the same clothes, wrinkled and stained. Living in her car was obviously taking a toll. Where is she? I asked Derek. ICU. They're still stabilizing her. The stroke was significant. They won't let us see her yet. I sat down. The plastic chair was uncomfortable. The TV in the corner played the news with the sound off. We waited. Amanda didn't look at me. I didn't look at her. Derek sat between us like a buffer. Hours passed. At 5:30 in the morning, a doctor came out. She looked tired. She asked for family, and all 3 of us stood up. The doctor glanced between us, clearly doing math about relationships, but didn't ask questions. Patricia was stable. The stroke had affected her left side. They wouldn't know the extent of permanent damage for a few days. She'd been under enormous stress, the doctor said. Her blood pressure had been dangerously high. The stroke was serious, but she'd gotten to the hospital quickly, which helped. Can we see her? I asked. The doctor nodded. 1 at a time. She's sedated but might be aware of voices. I let Derek go first. Then Amanda, who came out 10 minutes later crying harder than when she went in. Then it was my turn. The ICU was quiet, except for the beeping machines. Patricia looked tiny in the hospital bed, tubes and wires connecting her to various monitors. Her face was slack on one side. Her left hand lay useless on the blanket. She looked every day of her 72 years, and then some. I sat in the chair next to her bed, took her right hand, the one that still had some strength. It was cold. I'm here, I said quietly. I don't know if you can hear me, but I'm here. Her eyes moved under the closed lids but didn't open. I sat there for an hour, just holding her hand, thinking about everything. The journal, the years lost, the anger I'd carried, the success I'd built, the emptiness underneath it all. By the time I left, I'd made my decision. Not the one Amanda expected, not the one I'd planned, but the one that felt like it might let me sleep at night. The next 3 days were a blur. Patricia remained stable but sedated. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Amanda practically lived in the waiting room. Derek coordinated everything. I stayed at a hotel nearby, visited every few hours. On the 4th day, Patricia woke up. Her speech was slurred, her left side weak, but she was awake and aware. When she saw me sitting by her bed, tears leaked from her eyes. "Carlton," she managed. "You came." I nodded. "I'm here. I'm sorry," she said, the words thick and slow. "So sorry." "I know. I read your journal." Her right hand squeezed mine weakly. "I asked the nurse to give us privacy. Then I called Derek and Amanda in. We all stood around Patricia's bed, this broken family trying to figure out what came next. I told them I'd made a decision." Amanda's face filled with desperate hope. I held up a hand to stop her from speaking. "I will pay off all the debts. The house will be saved. But there are non-negotiable conditions. If any condition is broken, I walk away permanently, and you get nothing. Do you understand?" Both Patricia and Amanda nodded. "First condition. Amanda, you will enter a residential gambling addiction treatment program. 90 days minimum. I'll pay for it. You'll go next week." Amanda nodded immediately. "Yes." "Okay. Yes." Second condition. After treatment, you'll attend counseling and Gamblers Anonymous meetings twice a week for 2 years minimum. I'll require proof. Signed attendance sheets. If you miss more than 2 sessions in any 3-month period, I'm done." Amanda agreed. Third condition. You'll get a second job. You'll pay me back $20,000 over the next 5 years. $400 a month. It's not the full amount you stole and spent. It's a fraction. But you need to learn the value of money and accountability. If you miss a payment, I'm done." Amanda was crying but nodded. Fourth condition. I turned to Patricia. "You and I will attend family therapy together. 6 months, minimum. Once a week. We'll work on rebuilding some kind of relationship. I don't know if that's possible, but we'll try. If you miss a session without a medical excuse, I'm done." Patricia managed to nod despite the stroke's effects. Fifth condition. I looked at Amanda again. "You'll write a letter to the entire extended family confessing everything. The theft, the gambling, the lies about me. You'll clear my name publicly. No exceptions. The letter will go out next week." Amanda hesitated, then nodded. "If any of you violate these terms, I disappear from your lives forever. The house goes into a trust that you can live in, Patricia, but Amanda won't inherit. I'll make sure you're not homeless, Mom, but our relationship will be over. These are the terms. Take them or leave them." Patricia spoke slowly but clearly. "We'll take them. Thank you." Amanda said, "I'll do everything. I promise. Thank you. Thank you so much." I stood up. "I'm not doing this because you deserve it. I'm not doing it because it fixes the past. I'm doing it because Dad's death taught me that time runs out. And I don't want to become the bitter person you all believed I was 8 years ago." I looked at both of them. "But understand this. I'm not the son you threw away. I'm the man I built myself into without you. This is a new relationship with new terms. The old family is dead. We're figuring out what comes next, but it won't be what it was." Patricia nodded, tears running down the mobile side of her face. "I understand, and I'm grateful." I walked out of that hospital room feeling lighter than I had in years. 2 months have passed since that morning in the hospital. The house is saved, the foreclosure canceled, all debts paid. I wrote those checks and felt something release in my chest, some knot I'd been carrying for 8 years finally loosening. Amanda completed the 90-day residential program at a facility in Olympia. I visited her once, not because she asked, but because the therapist suggested family involvement helps long-term success. She looked different. Sober. Clear-eyed in a way I'd never seen. She apologized again, more coherently this time. Explained the progression of her addiction, how it had started small and grown until it consumed everything. She admitted she'd been too ashamed to come clean 8 years ago, that she'd convinced herself the lie would just blow over. By the time she realized how permanent the damage was, it felt too late to fix. The guilt had eaten at her, but fear kept her silent. She knew she was weak. She was working on that. I listened. I didn't absolve her, but I listened. She's out now, living in a small studio apartment in Puyallup, working 2 jobs like I used to, retail during the day, restaurant hosting at night. She sends me $400 the first of every month, never late. Includes a brief note updating me on her meetings and therapy. The notes are awkward but genuine. Last week she sent 600 instead of 400. The note said she'd gotten a raise and wanted to pay it down faster. That surprised me. Maybe people can change. Patricia is home from the hospital. The stroke left her with a permanent weakness on her left side and a slight slur to her speech, but she's mobile with a cane. I hired a financial advisor to manage her accounts, set up automatic bill payments, create a budget she can actually follow. She lives comfortably now on her Social Security plus a small stipend I provide. Not extravagant, but stable. We've had 6 therapy sessions so far. They're uncomfortable and often painful. Patricia has cried during 4 of them. We're unpacking 8 years of hurt, mistrust, and missed communication. Dr. Williams, our therapist, is patient. She keeps reminding us that rebuilding trust takes time. Patricia told me in our 4th session that she'll regret not believing me for the rest of her life. That she understands nothing can give me back those years or bring back Dad. That she's grateful I'm giving her a chance at all. I told her I was doing it for me as much as for her. That I needed to know I could choose compassion without being a doormat. We have dinner once a month, usually at a restaurant halfway between Seattle and Tacoma. The conversations are stilted at first, then gradually ease. We talk about work, about her physical therapy, about neutral topics. Slowly, we're building something new. It doesn't look like the old relationship. It's more honest, more boundaried, more real. Amanda joined us for dinner last week. It was tense. She barely spoke. But she showed up, and afterward she thanked me for letting her be there. Small steps. The extended family got Amanda's confession letter 6 weeks ago. My phone exploded with messages. Aunts, uncles, cousins I hadn't heard from in years, all apologizing, all wanting to reconnect. I responded to some, ignored others. Derek and I are closer now. His faith in me, even when I was at my worst, meant something. My father's grave is in a cemetery in Tacoma. I'd never visited before last month. Couldn't bear it. I went on a Tuesday afternoon when I knew no one else would be there. The headstone is simple granite. Gregory Miller, beloved husband and father. I stood there for a long time. Told him things I'd never gotten to say. That I didn't steal from him. That I loved him. That I wished he'd believed in me. That I forgave him, even though he never apologized. That I hoped wherever he was, he knew the truth now. I left flowers, white roses, his favorites. It didn't fix anything, but it felt necessary. My life hasn't changed much on the surface. I still have the penthouse, the job, the success. But something inside has shifted. I'm dating someone now, a woman named Heather, I met at a tech conference. I'm trying to let her in, trying to trust. It's hard. The walls don't come down easy, but I'm trying. I told her about my family situation on our 5th date. Expected judgment or pity. Instead, she said it sounded like I'd found a way to be strong without being cruel. That knowing when to hold a boundary and when to extend grace was rare. I'm not sure I deserve that assessment, but I'm working on living up to it. I've learned that holding on to hate would have destroyed me more than it would have hurt them. But blind forgiveness would have enabled their dysfunction, taught them that actions have no consequences. There had to be a third path, and I had to carve it out myself. Conditional compassion with clear boundaries. That's what Dr. Williams calls it. I call it survival with humanity intact. I'm not the same person who got kicked out at 24 with nothing but a backpack and $3,200. That experience broke something in me, but it also forged something. I learned I could survive anything. Build something from nothing. Stand alone. But I also learned that standing alone forever is just another kind of prison. True strength isn't revenge. It's not even forgiveness in the traditional sense. It's choosing growth over bitterness. It's maintaining your dignity while still recognizing the humanity in people who hurt you. It's understanding that you can acknowledge pain without letting it define you forever. My success isn't measured by my bank account, though that's comfortable. It's not measured by my job title, though I'm proud of what I've built. It's measured by my ability to break the cycle of pain without becoming heartless in the process. Amanda destroyed my life with a lie born from desperation and addiction. Patricia failed me as a mother, choosing comfort over courage. Dad died without knowing the truth. and that loss can never be recovered. These facts don't change. The hurt doesn't disappear. I still have moments of anger so intense I can barely breathe. But I also have moments now where I sit across from my mother at a restaurant and we laugh at something small and ridiculous, and for 5 seconds it feels almost normal. Where Amanda texts me a photo of her 1-year sobriety chip, and I feel something that might be pride. These moments don't erase the past. They coexist with it. Both things are true. They hurt me terribly, and they're trying to be better. I suffered unjustly, and I chose not to perpetuate that suffering. I wake up in my penthouse now and feel something other than emptiness. Not happiness exactly, not yet, but possibility. The future isn't just about building higher walls and accumulating more success. It's about figuring out how to be whole. Some days are harder than others. Some days I wonder if I'm making a mistake, if I'm setting myself up to be hurt again. Some days I want to take it all back, disappear into my self-made fortress, and never look back. But most days, I think I made the right choice. Not the easy one, not the satisfying one in the short term, but the right one. Because at the end of it all, I needed to prove something to myself. Not to them, to me. I needed to know that what they did to me didn't turn me into someone I couldn't recognize. That I could be strong and still kind. That I could hold people accountable and still offer them a path forward. That I could protect myself without becoming the villain they'd once believed I was. I'm still figuring out what forgiveness means. What family means when the original structure has collapsed. What it means to move forward while carrying the weight of the past. But I'm figuring it out on my terms now. With clear eyes and firm boundaries and a heart that's learning, slowly, to risk opening again. That's enough. For now, that's enough. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you trusted completely betrayed you, and then years later they needed your help? What would you do? Would you help them, or would you let them face the consequences alone? There's no right answer, and I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about forgiveness, boundaries, or second chances, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about real-life struggles and the complicated choices we all face. And share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's wrestling with their own family pain or difficult decisions about forgiveness. Thank you for listening to my story. I know it wasn't easy, and I appreciate you sticking with me through all of it. Whatever you're facing in your own life, I hope you find the strength to make the choices that let you sleep at night and look at yourself in the mirror with respect. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember that you're worth fighting for, even when the people who should have fought for you didn't.